Hello and welcome to Ramblings. You might remember last week we talked about several instances where our nation just was unprepared for a disaster when it struck. And I brought out the possibility might there be something left that we're unprepared for, that we could be prepared for, but that just is not being addressed. And I found an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse, could put us in a much worse shape than we are today. And I promised you someone who is extremely knowledgeable in this would join us for this show, and he's here with me today. His name is Ken Chrosniak. He's from Carlisle. Briefly, a 38-year military career, one that we've been talking about but don't have time to do that today. Very interesting individual, a great public service to his country. And Ken, I welcome you today. This show could go on for a couple of hours. Unfortunately, we're somewhat limited. Briefly, what is an EMP?
Basically, it's just an abbreviation for electromagnetic pulse. There's two types. There's natural and then there's man-made. Natural is a solar-induced solar flare. You know, right now we see an aurora borealis, or, you know, if you're up in the northern latitudes, you would see it, and it's beautiful. And sometimes you'll hear about a sunburst, a plasmatic event, where planes will have to be rerouted. Some of the ham radio operators will lose some connectivity. That type, it's usually pretty mild. But then there's three different types of EMP. There's an E1, which is a devastating pulse. In fact, even a massive solar flare, when it hits, NASA NOAA says we have a 12% certainty within the next 10 years that we'll have a global electromagnetic pulse from the sun. And basically, it could happen tomorrow, though. It's usually about 150 years apart, the big ones. The last one was in 1859 with the Carrington effect, where they saw that particular, you could read the newspaper in Jamaica. The only people that died were some teletype operators. That's the only electronics we had then. Telephone poles, telegraph lines were set on fire when you get about 1 million volts per meter going through them. It's the equivalent of 1 billion hydrogen bombs right above.
Well, what does it do? What does this thing do?
It just fries all the electronics. And right now, everything, we have more power in your wristwatch than Apollo 13 had going to the moon. And now it's very, very, they're so sensitive and there is no protection whatsoever. What compounds it even more is the electric grid is completely aged, it's vulnerable, and the electric industry knows this, but absolutely nothing has been done in any prior administration, Democrat or Republican, until President Trump came in office now. There's 2 executive orders in a Congressional National Defense Authorization Act that is ordering the federal agencies to prepare for this.
Do you feel they're doing that?
Pardon?
Are they doing that, do you think?
They're supposed to be doing that. Well, what obfuscates the time, what messes up the issue is that COVID-19 is here right now. The executive order was written on 26 March 2019, ordering the federal agencies to be nice with one another, talk with the public-private industry and so on, and prepare the American public for such an event. I think a lot of times the federal government doesn't want people to panic either. But a lot of people are aware of this, and it's not a case for panic, it's just prudent preparation. And a lot of things about preppers, they think you've got a tinfoil hat on, like in the movie Signs, and that you're some wacko. No. And I have a tendency to get off on some other subjects about this, but basically, I'll get back to the E1 is most devastating. There's an E2, which is pulse, that's lasts for a few seconds, that's just like lightning. We're prepared for that. We have lightning. You have that right in here. You have a surge protector. But that surge protector is not going to protect you against about 200,000 volts coming through. But it'll probably take about maybe 1,000 volts. The other one is an E3. That's devastating from the sun. The sun actually produces an E1 and E2, but minor, not to the event of a nuclear attack. The sun it'll radiate that voltage along railroad lines, telephone lines, undersea cables, pipelines. It'll go down to the deepest depths of the sea and completely make useless the underground sea cables.
This is a quick interruption from the side. Will this electrocute people?
No, it won't. Okay. Especially the E1 is initially devastating. It only lasts a second or so. Actually, a picosecond, which is what, 1/1,000,000th of a second? I'm not quite sure. Picosecond, nanosecond, what? And we have devices in the military that'll prepare us and protect the military to about 50,000 volts per meter. But the average, that's at the Cheyenne Mountain and other installations, the Pentagon, but they can maintain operation. Air Force One, they're hardened to a significant impulse. But the National Guard and the Reserve and so on, they're not hardened. The local police 911 stations aren't hardened. And they'll go down as soon as if not immediately, they'll be degraded, denied, or destroyed, the capability, after maybe 3 days. I don't know how much reserve fuel like the 911 center has over here on Claremont Road, but they'll be able to talk through 2 tin cans, which is going to do not going to do a lot of good in a string, because they're going to be completely incommunicado, except maybe for ham radio operators who'll be worth their weight in gold. But what's devastating, I like to talk about also, is that with COVID-19, which is the flavor of the day, the desperation of the day, is that with all the precautions that we're taking and so on, they're working. We're flattening the curve and so on. But what happens right now if we got hit with a solar flare? I call it a solar flare to be simplistic. A geomagnetic disturbance, a ground-induced current. There's different words for it. Or a nuclear, or a physical attack on the transformers, of which if you attack less than a dozen of them, you'll take down at least most of the eastern grid, which is significant. You'll have no internet. It'll just be rumors. You'll have no internet, no cell phone, no grocery stores.
So basically, anything that's energized won't be energized.
Everything stops.
Right.
And you'll go down to. You'll be back in the 1850s. We will be back in the 1850s. This has been studied with an EMP commission from 2001 to 2017, and they came out with 3 reports. These are Dr. Lowell, Dr. Graham, Dr. Peter Vincent Fry. I know these gentlemen. I sat on panels with Dr. Fry. They know it very well. Congress formed them to study a high altitude enemy nuclear burst. And we have enemies that'll do that. China, Russia, North Korea. North Korea can fire an ICBM right over the central part of the United States, right to us. And it doesn't take us, they can do it. And it doesn't take a sophisticated missile to it takes 10 kilotons. 10 kilotons is a very small load. Doesn't even weigh that much. And you don't have to have a reentry into the atmosphere. You won't worry about it burning up. They'll detonate it at about 400 miles, 400 miles, anywhere between 50 to 400 miles. And it's a line of sight, and it'll take out everything. So what can survive? You never know.
So what do we do? What should we do?
So what do? We have apparatus right now. We have everything but the will to do it, which is starting to blossom now. It's starting to blossom. We need the infrastructure to do it, and the infrastructure bill will be coming out fairly soon from President Trump and the Congress. They're both into, because every congressional district is going to be getting money, quite a few $1 billion. It's probably going to be
for this or.
For infrastructure, it's going to probably be.
Okay.
It's going to be in a package number 5 or whatever. I'm hoping it'll be. There's so many things to talk about here, so many moving parts. But what can be done? We have the apparatus right now. We have the equipment, the devices out there to protect the circuit breakers, the switches, the transformers, which are irreplaceable. The transformers weigh about 765,000 volt ones weigh about 400 tons, and they're all specifically made for the grid. When power is produced by a generating plant, like 3 Mile Island, which should never have closed, but 3 Mile Island, which is the cheapest and safest power there is, even more than natural gas. But anyway, it is generated. You have a step. It is a certain amount of power, but it has to be pushed up to maybe a couple, 200, 300, 400 miles. And they have a push-up step-up transformer that'll propel that because of ohms and resistance. It goes to another station and is booted a little bit more. It'll degrade over time, and then it reaches where step down. The power is quite a few 100,000 volts. They step down for the distribution centers, which you have right over here, not too far from us. That substation, and it's sent out to mom and pop and businesses and down to 240, 220, 150, 120 volt. That can all be protected. Right now, it's completely unprotected, and They take about 12 months to 18 months to make. They're not made in our own beautiful country. They're made in Malaysia, Germany, South Korea, Mexico. We have one plant, Mitsubishi plant, in Maxwell Air Force Base area down in Montgomery, Alabama. They make only about 500 kV, which is big. But I believe with a new infrastructure bill, it'll be important to have that capability. But we have the equipment right now. It's readily available, and it's not expensive at all. When President Trump asked me, then candidate Trump asked me, how much to harden the 350 extra high voltage transformers? And David Bellamy and I were looking at each other. He said, give me a ballpark figure, because we got that on the screen. And when he was talking to us, we said, $5 billion. And he said, how much to harden the entire grid? And we said, first of all, you can't do it. You won't the entire grid. You go for 20, 40, 50, 60%. We said about $50 billion. And as Ambassador Woolsey, the past CIA director, when we gave talks, he actually, I love it. I'll rip his words off. I'll lift. We don't plagiarize at the War College. We only lift good ideas from other people. If you even protect 20% of the electric grid, so you drink warm beer and take cold showers, but you'll still be alive. It turns out the most important factor, I can't go through everything in the few minutes we're talking. Yeah, okay. The most important factor that people will kill for is food. More than fuel and anything, you have to have, and right now they're talking about meat shortages. And some stores are rationing maybe two packages of chicken or beef or pork. We shouldn't have it. We've got food people will kill for. I saw it when I was in Bosnia. When some of the villages there, the municipalities went for almost a year without power. And talking with Soko Berkovic, I was going to bring his book in here to show you, who was a designated sniper because he was a good shot and he wouldn't waste ammunition. Anyway, people did unspeakable things that we recorded. So
let me try to paraphrase for you here, because we are running out of time. Basically, we may be taking steps under the current administration. She might finally being addressed after big steps, but it might be finally being addressed after 20 years of study and discussion. But that you can't take care of the entire grid, but you can take care of enough of the grid so that it's a country that can rehabilitate itself, can reconstruct after in a situation such as this, and move forward. And did I say that correct?
Yeah, reconstruct and reconstitute. You have to. A lot of it will be damaged, but again, you have to bring another transformer in specifically to Stump Jump County somewhere. There was a railroad track there. Now it's a jogging trail. How are you going to get it there? And after maybe a year of, you have single points of failure. People aren't going to show up after a while. Police fire. They'll have no water pressure at the fire company anyway. The SCADA systems, the Carlisle, is going to pretty well be flattened. Once the pulse comes through and you have power hammers from the natural gas, they'll move the pipeline, and you'll have explosions which have already killed about 1,500 people around the country, which I won't go there. A little over 1,500 people. The houses blew up that you may have heard out in Southern California and so on. And there'll be no fire company. There'll be no water pressure. No police. No 911. It'll just burn down.
Okay, and as we wrap this up, things are moving in a positive direction.
Yes.
And
definitely moving the needle to the right. We're progressing, but you have to basically, like my friend, the survival instructor, said, plan for the worst, hope for the best, and let God take the rest.
I think that's that's very succinct. Our guest today has been Ken Chrosniak, obviously very knowledgeable, and as I said at the beginning of the show, we could probably run this one from 3 to 6 hours, and he'd still have another 24 hours of talk to go. We thank you for your service to our country, for your 38-year. You want to say one more thing?
And I'm available to brief any organization. I briefed individuals, from now President Trump up to 2,200 Mormons out in the Palladium in Delta, Utah. They flew me out there, and I talked for 6 hours. So I can do this.
I'll tell you what we'll do. We're going to put your email address up, and it'll be available, and people can make contact with you then. So I would like to say thank you to everyone who has joined us. We'll surprise you with what our next one will be. So Kirk Wilson, your host on Ramblings.